I find customers are more open to partnering with you to help you improve. I would say intensity and professionalism, where you show up on time for every call. We have gotten feedback even on that. We used to sometimes show up a few minutes late to a call because the previous call ran over. It's not like they were taking a break and came late for the next meeting, but still we need to learn to end the previous meeting on time. We need to learn to start the every meeting on time, which I feel sometimes we still make the mistake. We need to make sure every meeting you have with the customer has a published agenda, and immediately after the meeting you're sending the action items. All of this means the customer takes you more seriously and mirrors your approach to the partnership.
Welcome to Customer Unsuccess, the podcast where we cut out the noise and talk with real leaders about their hardest lessons in customer success and other go-to-market motions. I'm your host, Joe DeGrande, and in each episode, we're going to unpack real challenges from real leaders, failed tech implementations, a strategy that didn't yield results, or difficult customers. But more importantly, we're going to take those lessons learned and share them with you so that way you can avoid those same mistakes with your team. So if you're in customer success, sales, or other go-to-market motions, stick around to hear from the best. Now let's dig into it. On this week's episode of Customer Unsuccess, we have Sri Ganesan. He's the co-founder and CEO of RocketLane, and he tells a story about how bringing intensity to implementation and professional services projects is crucial for success. We talk about CSAT surveys, escalation strategies, and more. Really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do too. Now let's dive in. Sri, thanks so much for joining the Customer Unsuccess podcast. I know we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're here now, which is great. But for those that don't know, Sri, he's actually the co-founder and CEO of RocketLane. So we'll give a little bit more context on that. But thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here and excited to chat today and share some of our learnings. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Absolutely. And I guess, Sri, so just taking a step back, I guess, can you give us a little background on RocketLane as well? Because, it's interesting, right? There's a ton of tools in the space, but I'm always curious to hearing where you guys kind of fit within a tech stack and where you guys could be beneficial, obviously within CS or go-to-market in general. So I guess just maybe giving some context would be great.
Sure. I think one of our realizations, the way we even started RocketLane was we had a previous venture, got acquired by a company called Freshworks. We spent another 4.5 years continuing to build that business at Freshworks. The end of which we reflected back on like a 7.5 year journey and, asked ourselves, what are the various things that felt broken? And one very clear area among others, this wasn't the only idea we considered, right? So one of the things that emerged was, there was too much anxiety around this whole implementation and, services project work that we were doing with customers. My mind used to always, like when we were closing a large deal, it would always go to, oh, who do I put on this project? Oh no, Sudhir is already taking care of these 3 other accounts. How do I make sure, these folks get the best because it's our largest deal? And then there's the new largest deal that comes up next, and you're again in that same spot, right? And it was because of having that scars of, when something goes wrong, it, puts that partnership which you thought is going to grow so quickly under a lot of pressure. An escalation comes to me, and then someone jumps in, becomes the hero and saves the day. But it shouldn't be all down to heroes saving the day, right? So that is where I think the original thought came. Why are we using like a combination of spreadsheets, there's project management tools, there's a Slack shared channel, and on top of all of that, there's emails going back and forth. No one truly knows the real sentiment of the customer around how things are going. The customer also feels everything is a black box. Like, I don't know if I will truly launch on the date you guys promised. So there was so much chaos around it that we felt, okay, it's worth investigating into this area. And that's where we got started, really.
Awesome. No, it's super interesting. I think when it comes to implementations, right, especially with SaaS, even pro services, there's a lot of moving parts that people forget about. But it is like it is a two-way street, so to speak, where both parties need to work together to make sure they achieve certain goals and milestones. And it's interesting to hear that's where kind of, Rocket Lane kind of fits that. Now,
Yeah.
I know when we talked right before this, you mentioned stories on like, hey, what were some of the challenges specifically that kind of came up, right? And I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit more about that, because there's, right, when we're talking about customer unsuccess, like, hey, what were essentially those, those stories that kind of came into where it's like, hey, this is a huge mistake. This is where maybe the idea of Rocket Lane came up, or whatever that might be. Like, I'm curious as far as like, what were some of those failures? Because of course, like, uh, give those takeaways to the audience as far as how to avoid that moving forward.
Yeah. Give me one example of like a failure point that came in before the Rocket Lane journey, but even in the Rocket Lane journey, we've had enough learnings that we've, had to take. It's not like because we're building the software for the space, we do everything perfectly. We still have our learning to go through in this journey as well, right?
Yep.
So I think one of the mistakes I learned about from the previous venture, which we set out to address as part of Rocket Lane also, was this whole, you have a services project, and there's so many ways in which things can go off track without you noticing till it's too late. Give a couple of examples. Let's
Sure.
say there is you budgeted a certain number of hours for the work that you're doing with the customer. Typically, only when you get close to, I'm 90% done with the budgeted hours, I've like spent X number of hours, but I'm only 20% or 30% of, completion from a project perspective,
Yeah.
that you realize things are completely out of whack. And even if it is 60% done and you're 90% burnt through your budget, it's a bad thing, right?
Right.
How can we, because, when you go back to the customer at that point saying, hey, seems like, we need to buy more service hours. It's not going to happen because you don't want to have that hard conversation. They don't want to, actually pay more when they feel, hey, you've just been doing the work you signed up to do. It's in no one's interest to make that happen. Ultimately, the business suffers because, your finances, your margins take a hit. You just say, I'm going to eat the cost. Or you risk annoying the customer about it and have the conversation. But usually people avoid it, especially in SaaS, right? And you eat the cost, which is what I think we were also doing. And then we realized, hey, what if there is a way where every early milestone, we have a way of checking, hey, is it within the right parameter, right? If I've finished my solutioning, am I under 15% at that point from a budget spend perspective? If I'm finishing my, uh, you know, initial implementation before it goes to UAT, am I under 60% at that point? So things like that as guardrails, as ways to get early warnings from the system, because then you can say, hey, why am I at 22% already at solutioning? Oh, this customer has increased the scope in these ways. Early on, catching the issue, having a conversation with the customer is much easier than going to them too late about a problem. I would say it's the same thing with customer sentiment as well, right? I'm sure there are many times when we would have seen at the end of the journey, the customer says, hey, you folks, from the beginning, you didn't have your act together. Here's what I saw early on. Here's what happened at kickoff. You still asked us the same questions you came in with during sales. From get go, this has not been great for us. But you didn't know. I mean, the leader did not know till it was too late, till the escalation happened, that this was the sentiment. And one of the things we do now is like a CSAT at every critical milestone, where customer gives like a rating around how the kickoff went. Customer gives the rating around, hey, this is like we finished our solutioning, it's approved by the customer. The customer also rated how we did at that milestone. Now, if it's a 2-star or 1-star, you probably would have heard about it already without running a CSAT. But if it's a 3-star or 4-star, you're probably not hearing about it till it's too late. And a poor experience is usually a string of 3-star experiences. It doesn't have to be two,
Mm.
right? Hey, you were average. You were average. I thought you will improve, but you were still average. You were average. This is
Yeah.
not who I wanted as a vendor.
Right.
So, and it's happened to us, right? Like um, the good thing is now every time there is that 3-star, there is immediately an automated message that goes from me to the customer side stakeholder who rated it 3 stars, who says, "Hey, um, and the message says, we strive to deliver 5-star experiences for customers. Can you tell me a little more about what we should have done better over here?" And customers typically, and we take feedback as a gift. Say all of that. Customers typically tend to respond to it. Okay, CEO has taken time to ask, let us give our input. Very often they even get on a call. And then you learn that the reason they're giving you feedback is very often they see the potential in your product, in your offering, but they see that the engagement is not living up to that standard that they expected. And they actually want well for you when they're giving that feedback. They want you to do better and succeed.
Yeah.
And the moment you have the partnership going the right way, the moment you fix that, I see every failure as an opportunity for a remarkable recovery, right? It's not just about, okay, address the concern, but to show up so much better once you get that feedback. It's a real opportunity to turn around an experience, and customers actually value that more. If everything went smooth, you may be a 8 on 10. If something went wrong and you recovered remarkably, then you're probably a 9.5 on 10. So I'll stop for a moment to see if you had any other comments.
No, this is great. A lot to unpack here, and I think it's actually really interesting because you're spot on when it comes down to like it's like CSAT. You could also almost compare it to like MPS as well, just like generally within the product. Any of these particular rating scales, because 1 to 2, someone could be extremely just frustrated or whatever. They could just be ranting, but it's true. It's that 3 to 4 where it becomes a concern, and that's where there's an opportunity to jump on it, but I want to unpack more about the nipping it early, right? I think it's super important that the client does do their part, right, of actually speaking up. I think as it goes back to again that two-way street concept, because it's true they do want they're spending however many thousands of dollars on whatever solution, or it could be even well into 6, 7 figures, etc. But they want to make sure that it's a good partnership and they kind of provide that feedback early. So that's 100% right. But I guess like beyond the right, so it's awesome that we have automation in play to trigger that. I'm curious as far as now what happens, I guess, for that next step. Like what are some examples that you seem to be successful where whether it's you jumping in or someone else jumping in to kind of address any sort of concerns early in the like implementation phase and so on?
I think the standard lesson is escalate the partnership faster when there is an issue. Don't expect it to be resolved. Don't make it about, oh, implementation manager, go get the feedback and improve on it yourself. Because customers may find it harder to give feedback to the person directly. Uh, Here is what you're not doing well. And two, they understand that leadership cares, and you know, as long as you have like a, I would say we've taken the effort for a longer message, uh, and not just, hey, tell me more. I find that people like the fact that you reached out with a thoughtful message, and you take their input. And then I think there is, when we truly go at it from like a learning mentality, with a learning mentality into that conversation, and you take your notes, you send your action items immediately after, saying, here's what we're going to do to fix this going forward. Thank you so much for your feedback. Keeping this channel open for anything else you want. Please surface it proactively. I know it's hard work for you to make time to give us the feedback. Here is a token of appreciation from us for you putting in the time for this feedback. It could be a book that you've enjoyed reading that you're giving them. It could be Here's coffee for the week. Like a small gesture. It's not about like a monetary reward. It's more about saying, hey, we value this feedback. It's worth something to us. And here's how we are acting on the feedback.
Right.
And it's also worthwhile for them to know that you're not looking at it as, oh, someone screwed up, I'm going to punish them about it. It's more about
Sure.
how can we all learn together, and we are learning and improving, right? So that's sort of our approach of how to do that recovery. And I feel if in general your team approaches this whole engagement with a certain intensity, transparency, I find customers are more open to partnering with you to help you improve. Intensity, I would say intensity and professionalism, where you show up on time for every call. We have gotten feedback even on that, right? We used to sometimes show up a few minutes late to a call because the previous call ran over.
Sure.
But yes, the person is only working all the time. It's not like they were, you know, taking a break and came late for the next meeting. But still, we need to learn to end the previous meeting on time. We need to learn to start the every meeting on time, right? Respect
Yep.
everyone's time.
Sure.
So even those kind of things, all of it adds up. If you started every meeting on time, you had a clear agenda on the, you know, and this is something which I feel sometimes we still make the mistake. We need to, make sure we don't make the mistake again. But every meeting you have with the customer has a published agenda. What's going to be covered in that meeting? Everyone knows what to prepare and come. And immediately after the meeting, you're sending the action items. You're, weekly sending that status update on a regular basis. All of this means the customer takes you more seriously and mirrors your approach to the partnership. And this does not mean I'm saying, you just need to be straight faced and, in it all the time. Still develop your relationships, you still build rapport. All of that is warranted and important. But you also do the work in a very professional way. You don't take the customer for granted. You don't allow the customer to take you for granted.
Sure.
One of the cool things we do at kickoff is we actually tell customers feedback is, there's a slide called feedback is a gift. So give us feedback along the way. And there is a slide that talks about escalating the partnership. It says, here's who you would reach out to if you needed to, one of our leaders to intervene with something, and tell us who we should reach out to if we are not getting responses on time, we are not making progress together. Give us the names of like your escalation hierarchy. And it's a perfectly valid thing to ask for, because very often customers go, missing during a project, and we want to prevent that from happening. You bought us for a reason. Hey, exec sponsor, there's a reason you signed that check and signed the contract and are in a partnership with us. So we know this is important to you. What do we do if some of your team doesn't realize it's important, or if your priorities change? We want to realign on why that's changed. Who do we go to? Give us the names, right? So that's something that we do as well.
Awesome. No, I love it. And I was just taking some notes here because there's a lot to I want to dig into. But I guess we talk about bring up so professionalism clear as day, right? Making sure you mentioned some great examples like coming to the calls on time, setting client expectations. But I'm curious, how do you define intensity? Like when you're defining, like if you were to go tell your team or just tell the audience, right? Like bring in the intensity, right? So there's professionalism, then there's intensity. I'm curious, how do you define that? Like, what are some examples there?
I think in my head, intensity means the ball is always in our court. You're never waiting on the customer and saying, hey, I was just waiting on you. If you're waiting on the customer, it means the next step is still on you, and it is to follow up in like a very, I would say, intense cadence till you get the response to escalate the partnership quickly.
Sure.
The things that happen in general are, where we go wrong is, oh, I think I can recover from this delay over the next 2 weeks. So I'll work more later to make up for this. Or the customer hasn't done this, but hopefully if they do it by Wednesday, then we're good. or I followed up yesterday. I don't know if I should again follow up today. I should give it 2 days and then follow up. No, we're going to follow up every day if we're not getting a response. We're not going to be
Right.
apologetic about it. We're going to
Sure.
tell the customer on day one that, hey, we're going to be, you know, we believe this project is important to you. And so we're going to be on it. We're going to be following up every day if we don't get something from you. If you want us to do things differently, you tell us. And no leader on the other side would tell you, no, take it easy, right? They're going to be
Hmm.
like, oh, this is the kind of partnership I want. I want you guys to hold my guys accountable, right? So
Yeah.
that's sort of what leaders want. And I think it's also about, um, in a way, I would say, turning up, buttoned up with all the prep that's gone in, all of that also shows intensity. You know, when you come really prepared, it shows that you're there to make it happen, and you want the customers to feel that energy coming from you. You know, in every moment, you want to. I think quick decisions is again something that
Mm.
showcases intensity as a trait. If you know you're able to help them make a decision, push them to make the decision faster, all of that matters too.
Awesome. No, 100%. I think it's interesting too because there's a lot of similarities even when it comes to, to sales. If you're actually doing like a sales motion, along with implementation, right? You want to follow up, you want to make sure you get things done, you move things across the line. But and it if you set the adequate expectations with the customer at the forefront, then it's okay. I think you're 100% right. You can follow up every day, check in with them, give them a phone call, send them that email or Slack message, and there's tons of ways in which you communicate now with customers. But um, expectation setting, I think, is a good piece as well. And it actually brings me to a good segue to the next point. So we're talking about, so the team brings the intensity, right? They're bringing the professionalism. They're staying on top of their book of business from an implementation onboarding perspective, right? I even had conversations recently with leaders about the challenges with working with customers, right? And again, at customer success, you have to manage customers, right? That's the business that you're in, right? But I guess like it's interesting because you have a strong ethos on making sure that they do their end of the job as well, right? They do their part. So I'm curious, like for the audience, if there are like vendors listening in, whether it's CS and so on, and they're on the receiving end where they're using a tool, I guess like what are some ways they can better prepare and work with their vendors? I think it's something that's not talked about a bit, and I'm curious because I'm sure you've seen some good examples there, or bad examples too. So curious to get your perspective on that.
You mean how a customer should be prepared, or
Yeah,
how they should
exactly.
look to engage?
Right. So
Okay.
exactly, like if you have a customer of RocketLane, what should they be bringing to the table or not be doing? Right, like vice versa. There.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is they should educate you about their organizational goals and how this initiative ties into the organization goal. Usually, sometimes it's discovered during the sales process, and that's why you know why they bought. But sometimes it's lost in translation when it comes to implementing the software, because people go into the nitty gritties of specific workflows. I used to do it this way. It's one more click, to do it another way, etc. I think what needs to be reinforced from early, the exec sponsor needs to be part of the kickoff, and they need to talk about what trade-offs are okay and why they are okay, right? They need to talk
Mm,
about, hey, here's what we want out of this project. Now, we may need to change our process. We may need to do a few more things, but here's the outcome we're looking for. So optimize for this outcome. If it means more work for us, that's okay. If this is the outcome we need, Uh, so we are not stuck on the unimportant things. We are focused on the larger goal for the partnership, and everyone knows what is the true. When you want to add something or remove something from the scope, it's easier to decide what makes sense in the partnership when you have that clarity from the leader, right? So I
mm,
think it's a leader's responsibility to set that clarity for the whole partnership for their team to know where to push back, where not to push back, how to drive change management, etc. Uh, with this narrative, right? So this narrative is the start for everything else. The second thing I would say is, you know, I think sharing how you work best with the vendor. There's some people who like to play around and do things on their own and, do the homework they've been given before a next meeting.
Yeah.
There's some people who don't find the time to do it.
Mm,
And they turn up for the next meeting underprepared and you don't make progress together. I feel the customer should know which bucket they fall into and work accordingly. If there's someone who's not going to be able to have the discipline to do the homework, then either put something on the calendar to, actually block time to get it done, or do it as a workshop together instead of doing it in a silo. If that's not how it's going to work, if you're feeling lost, etc., about like coming up with something, then ask for help and uh, get together with the vendor and do the work rather than turn up for the next meeting without making any progress. So that's sort of what I would say. It's okay if you are not the expert in the function to drive things forward. It's okay to admit that you need guidance on how to do something. And our realization is also this, right? Like the exec on the customer side actually wants the vendor to be the expert, wants the vendor to guide what needs to be done. Very often, sometimes even we've gone into customer calls saying, "Oh, what automations do you want us to set up for you?" I mean, customer has no clue. You
right.
may have shown a few examples, but they don't know which are the best high impact automations they could be using.
Sure.
You need to tell them, hey, here's the most useful automations our customers have used. Does this make sense for you? You want some flavor of this? These are the areas where we're able to apply. You want to pick one of these areas to focus on, and we'll come up with some examples for what we can do for you over there, and you tell us whether that's going to work out for you. So that sort
Yeah.
of partnership is what works well.
100%. Yeah, it's interesting too because I deal with a lot of this with my customers too when it comes to automation, just on customer touch points, right? From again, like in CSP, sales engagement platforms. And it's interesting because you said it in the beginning and it's perfect, right? Like the executive sponsor, that decision maker that's kind of leading the charge, they have to sell you on they have to sell the vision. They probably already did. Oops, excuse me. They probably already did, obviously, to get the solution, but now they need to communicate it. And that way it comes out in that implementation phase. And then once you have the vision, then comes the use case, then comes the automation. And again, it's all that level of, preparedness, right? It's the homework that they need to do in order to get ready. I'm actually curious too, like, when you start to recognize that a customer isn't necessarily holding up their end of the bargain, right? I guess, like, how has your team approached it, right? Like, is that finding new people to handle like that homework? Maybe it's someone that just doesn't have the time, and right, like, I'm curious as far as like some strategic ways in which the team has had, figured out how like to better address those different situations.
We've done a variety of things. We've offered that, hey, if you think you wouldn't have the bandwidth for this, here are some partners who can guide you, help you on. Let's say they need to come up with their own new process design. I don't think our implementation team can go in and help with, documenting, coming up with a new process for them, validating if that's the right process. But we have an ecosystem of partners who can do that sort of work. So you need the partner. If so, tell us, because let's involve the partner. Let's get the job done uh, instead of us waiting on each other endlessly without making progress together. So that's one way. Uh, and yeah, it's truly a function of what's causing these delays, right? If it's just like a discipline thing, then I think you escalating the partnership quickly is one of the ways in which you highlight uh, Steer cores are one way to do it, where you set expectations early on, especially for enterprise projects, that every 3 weeks there is going to be a steering committee meeting.
Mm.
I was actually chatting with a company last week. They were asking, "Hey, we don't know how to make the customer make progress. They're very often stuck in these things," and they actually do a free implementation, free POC, after which the customer buys.
Mm.
And if they're stuck in that POC for 6 months, then it's delaying the revenue for the whole company, right? And it's also locking up resources, because even if the customer is
Yeah.
not turning up, you're like preparing, you're going again, you're following up. It's mental bandwidth as well in terms of how many accounts you can handle.
Right.
Yeah, one of the ideas we came up with in that brainstorming session was to say, if you're signing up for a free POC, if you asked for free, then exec, you need to turn up, once in 3 weeks in a call with me, because I know that if I'm blocked on something with your team, if you turn up, they act differently. If you ask them questions, they're going to move forward faster. So we need the steering core if we need to do a free POC. So that's like one kind of balance over there.
Gotcha. No, it's a good way. Like kind of the takeaway there. It's well, one, the partners thing is it's interesting, right? Because it kind of gives them the ability to get someone to just kind of offload that work, right? Take some weight off of their shoulders. But also too, it kind of goes back to, again, like setting those expectations, making sure that you're meeting those deadlines ahead of time. And then I think the standing meeting, I think it's great. Setting that as far as whether, I think you said a frequency of every 3 weeks. It gives it visibility. Also too, in a remote world, I think I mean, with customers in general, right? You're going to be remote, you're going to be having phone calls, but it gives the ability to kind of versus over email, right? Just it's having that standing meeting gives that opportunity to speak and then get a little bit more in depth if there is a challenge where they might be struggling, and you kind of uncover any sort of additional blockers and roadblocks. But good stuff. We also talked about in as far as when we're doing these implementations and onboarding, to be prescriptive as possible, right? I guess like tell me more about that, right? As far as like what that really means when we're getting down to, so we talked about like expectations and timelines, from a higher level, but I'm curious about being how prescriptive you have to be, and like what are some of those examples of like details, that could often be missed too.
Sorry, how prescriptive in the whole implementation journey, you mean? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, a mistake we made, I would say, is we have product experts, but our product grew in its breadth and depth and capability set very rapidly in the last 3 years, right? So we started off as, uh, you know, part of the solution we are today in the category called client onboarding.
Mm.
Now we are a full-fledged PSA since 2023, and we are like the leading modern PSA. But when we made that transition, a lot of our team knew the product really well, all of our capabilities really well, but not necessarily the space and the lingo of the prospect, and like why do they care about certain objectives, all of that, which meant we weren't able to guide them prescriptively to start with. We
Mm.
were learning from the customer and about like why they were doing things a certain way, why they needed things a certain way, and then we would set it up within RocketLane that way. Now we've done a bunch of coaching now to
Sure.
overcome that, to help the team learn. And now one of the first things I do, there's a new hire, is, okay, here's the hardest topics that you're going to come across. Like you need to learn about revenue recognition, you need to learn about how are the different ways companies do resourcing for a project, and why they take different approaches and where, so that we can now guide the customer on, hey, for your kind of company, here's the right way to do it. Here's the best way to accomplish it. Here's the easier way to do it. And we're able to challenge them when they say they do things differently, because we have a better way, which may not be the way they're used to doing things, but it helps overall to Align early on with the key stakeholder again about, hey, we know now how best to get to the outcomes you want. So tell us the outcomes you want. Let us prescribe the initiatives, firstly, of getting to those outcomes. And let us optimize for driving those right outcomes with your team. My take is customers will always tell you, no, it's different for us. Here is why we do things a different way. And sometimes our teams accept it. I think we need to go into like a why, like multiple levels of whys
Mm-hmm.
to truly understand what's happening. I'll give you an example from our own world, right?
Sure.
Very often customers will say, hey, the customer portal that you have, I don't know if our customers will use it. They're different. They're enterprise. They, may not adopt. And we're like, hey, the whole point of building this was for those enterprise customers. We've done enough validation with them. We've done enough surveys and all of that. And we have customers using it with their enterprise customers, which you may believe your customers are different, but let's try. Let's introduce this in this way. We are happy to shadow you on a couple of calls where you introduce it to a customer so that we are DMing with you about how to overcome objections you may have. And then when they go on the call, they introduce it the way we tell them to introduce it. Zero objections. Exec
Mm.
stakeholder happy to see that, oh, wow, I have this dashboard where I can track things. And the rest of the team is in line because the exec can now see things. If, that's one more way of holding customers accountable, right? Like give the
Yep.
visibility to the leader and everyone else knows that the leader can watch, the leader is going to get notifications. There's going to be these, warnings and escalations that come from a system. It's not coming from a person, it's coming from a
Right.
system. And that again helps.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's funny because we often, at least from what I've seen on like a customer support side or and customer success, kind of both of those functions, there is sometimes that reluctancy to kind of push back on the customer to kind of overcome those objections because they kind of associate it with sales. But it is true. You kind of need to, one, of course, you have to build that trust with the customer first, but it's okay to push back and kind of try to overcome those objections and have them look at you as a trusted advisor, obviously within the benefits, how it's going to impact their business. So I love it. I think that's awesome. And also too, it's diagnosing, right, the problem, like dig deeper, understanding why, and don't stop at the surface level, objection, and just continue on. I think that's awesome. Well, we're coming up on time, believe it or not. This is an awesome conversation. I guess like to kind of wrap up. So we talked about some of those key takeaways there. But I guess like I want to hear from you, Sri. Like I guess like if we were to summarize this, like as far as the learnings today, right? I know we just talked about some of those, but like how would you kind of break this down as far as when it comes to onboarding and implementation? Like what are some of the key takeaways and learnings, what to avoid and what to do?
Right. Um, I would say do the basics right for sure, right? Like don't
Sure.
mess up on any of the basics from how you turn up, how you engage, how you uh, bring that energy, intensity, and preparedness, professionalism into every conversation you do. Escalate partnerships faster when things are going off track. Have a way to get early warnings and signals around things going off track before it's too late. It's better you escalate than the customer escalates with you, right? It's better you take charge before things go south. Uh, and then I think turn your team into consultants who understand the domain, not just your product. So they need to be able to guide the customer on, you know, what they want to accomplish. They need to be digging deep into the whys behind what the customer wants to be able to uncover what are the true goals for the customer and ensure it always aligns with the exec's goals from the overall engagement, that you're optimizing for the right outcomes at an organizational level and understanding the trade-offs calling out the trade-offs and making sure people are able to accept the trade-offs. So that's sort of my summary.
Awesome. No, I love it. I think it's definitely a good way to wrap it up. I think there's a lot of good nuggets in there. I guess you have obviously a wealth of knowledge, I don't even know. I think your background is around anywhere between, 10 to 15 or probably more years of experience within product and onboarding and CS. I'm curious, where do you go to, or you have in the past, for your learnings? I mean, experience, books, courses. I'm just curious as far as, some areas for the audience to continue to look and, build take in that knowledge.
In general, I'm someone who learns from other people. So I meet a lot of other founders who've been there, done that, try to get to their biggest lessons from their journeys. I learn a lot from our customers, even prospects, about our space, about, how they view things, but also, just lessons about how to think about business, right? And then I do read books from time to time based on recommendation. I would say it's gone down a lot compared to before, but maybe I'll even share a couple of books that I've enjoyed reading. One is this book called Leadership and Self-Deception. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a very interesting topic, which I feel applies both in personal life and professional life. And it's also a very easy read. It's like a story. It's told in the form of a story, but it's a nice lesson. And maybe another one I would recommend is Made to Stick, which is about how to communicate your ideas. I think it's meant more for from a journalistic perspective, how to write, etc., but also how to communicate ideas in general.
Gotcha. No, that's awesome. I'll definitely have to check those out. And I guess for the audience, where can everybody find you, Sri, if they want to connect or just follow you?
I am at sri@rocketlane.com on email. I am Sri Krishnan G, SRIKRISHNANG on Twitter, and you can find me as Sri Krishnan Ganesan on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, so yeah.
Awesome. Good stuff.
And
good stuff.
of course, go to rocketlane.com and you can contact us from there as well if you're interested in professional services, automation, software, etc.
For sure. Awesome. No, I'm sure they will. We'll put those in the show notes for sure. Well, thanks so much, Sri, for coming on. I've really enjoyed the conversation. But yeah, look forward to talking again soon. Stay in touch.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you got some value from this conversation, hit subscribe, leave a rating or review, and share it with someone who's also out there trying to build a better customer success or go-to-market strategy, even if it's messy along the way. And if you want more frameworks, tools, automated playbooks, check out jodastechtouch.com and subscribe to our newsletter. That link is in the description. Thanks so much for being here. Keep building, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one. Quick note before we wrap. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The ideas and opinions shared here are of my own or those of my guests, and don't reflect the views of any current or former employers, clients, or partners. We might reference tools, platforms, or companies, but nothing shared here should be taken as fact, endorsement, or criticism. Do your own research and always consult your team or legal counsel when making any business decisions. This content is not legal, financial, or business advice. It's just us sharing what's worked, what hasn't, and how we've learned from both. So thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.